It's very clear based on your witness and the experiences you've had that there are deep structural problems with the FBI. The financial incentives alone that the agency has in order to pursue certain lines of inquiry. What are the structural reforms that we need to do to the FBI to get it to stop behaving this way?
If I was a dictator for a day, the FBI would be broken into 1,000 pieces and scattered to the wind. And that I'm hardly an impartial person on that. So I think you have to be pragmatic with it. But I think recently we saw the shooting in Utah, and the questions that went over that are revealing the problems that exist with the trust the American people have with the FBI. Probably it was a righteous shoot, but I know there's a large swath of citizens that say, I don't trust anything the FBI says at this point. So there needs to be major reforms. It cannot just be a change at headship of the director's office. I've proffered, I believe, something that's fair, and I would be willing to give a try to, and that would be to return the FBI to its origin of being an unarmed investigative agency. You could today, through appropriations, the House Republicans could eliminate the 1811 criminal investigator, the special agent position from the FBI. Let's eliminate the guns and then make them unarmed investigators. There's already a position that exists. It's an 1810. They're typically more administrative, regulatory investigators, but we could maybe expand their responsibilities. And then through appropriations, force the FBI to get the permission of a local agency that has jurisdiction in the area that they want to conduct an investigation. And then use the task force officers like the ones that were on my Joint Terrorism Task Force. We could expand that effort. We could federally deputize more detectives at sheriff's offices and police offices, make them both state and federal law enforcement officers. Have them assist in those investigations. Those guys have the local knowledge. They have the experience. They didn't just go to Quantico for 20 weeks. Before that, they were a real estate agent or something. These guys are experienced cops, and becoming a task force officer is something that you earn by demonstrating your abilities. They would assist the FBI in those investigations. And then when it comes time to effect an arrest, if it's warranted, again, get the permission of the local sheriff, and the task force officers who work for that agency would execute that arrest. And that creates the bulwark, I believe, against a weaponized, politicized FBI, because a sheriff who's more accountable to his constituents can stand in the gap between them and the FBI and say, you're not going to arrest my citizen here. I don't concur with that. And I make it a comparison to the way we used to elect senators or select senators in the country before the 17th Amendment. They came from the state houses. And it was a way for the states to give the federal government the personnel and made them more responsive to the needs of the states. Here we can do that. We can make the FBI more accountable to the local needs of the police and the sheriff's offices, because they're really going to sign off on what their needs are. It's not going to be a quota system that comes from Washington, D.C., from a bureaucrat at the J. Edgar Hoover building. It's going to be a deputy, a chief deputy, or a sheriff who's going to say, look, here are my problems that I want addressed in my communities, and these are the only sort of crimes that I'm going to sign off on and authorize you to investigate.
Are there any reasons to believe that certain national cases that are very complex, that involve many states, many jurisdictions, would be harder to solve if that system were implemented?
I don't think so. I think the task force officers are more than equipped. They're experienced investigators. Many times in my career that I've worked with them, they were the superior law enforcement professional in the actual room. So I think we need to give the cops their due. The FBI is not the magical police. And this bore itself out to me most with the Brett Kavanaugh investigation. They said the FBI needs to investigate this alleged sexual assault that happened decades ago. And I remember thinking, like, we don't have that ability. That's not even a federal crime. But secondly, we're going to find the DNA evidence because the FBI is involved. That's not true. The FBI is mostly nerds in cubicles. The actual cops are the guys that know how to do investigations. And I'm not arguing for defunding police. I'm arguing for empowering the agencies and the local police that have the skill set if not necessarily the resources to bring those investigations forward.
One of the things that's happening with law enforcement across the board, and frankly, many typically more masculine, high difficulty positions, is that there's a recruitment crisis. People don't want to become cops anymore because they see that there is enormous social stigma associated with doing so. Is a similar thing happening in the FBI, or is recruitment as good as it's always been because it's the most prestigious thing to do? And if you're not getting, folks like yourself with a law enforcement background, you're at least getting the kind of Pete Buttigieg's of the world who want, a nice sinecure in DC. What's the situation with that pipeline?
There's definitely a purge going on through the application and hiring process where they're getting people that are more aligned with their political worldview. From what I understand, with the new agents coming in and the way that they've lowered standards or augmented the standards. Christopher Wray testified that despite the public disapproval of his agency, the fact that they have a record number of applicants is grounds for giving himself a pat on the back that the FBI is just fine. And I've just compared that to a restaurateur who his customers come to him and say, every time I eat your food, I get food poisoning. Christopher Wray's customers are the American people. And he's saying, well, I have a record number of people who want to be waiters, so we're doing just fine. And that's just not logical. And I think you just have to look at the proof is in the pudding here for no pun intended. The FBI is not doing the work I think that the public at large expects it to do. Criminal investigations. It's getting roped into these intelligence investigations. It's getting roped into the politics of choosing its targets. And there needs to be major reform. I think that my idea has some merit. I would encourage the Republicans who actually do have the power to implement it to look into that seriously.
Have any Democrats been receptive to your message and the reforms that you're calling for?
A few journalists have. Matt Taibbi I think has made no secret about the fact that he's been a Democrat voter. And he came and heard my story out and then wrote a nice, I felt very fair and balanced piece about it. Michael Shellenberger has as well. And recently I did an interview with an individual from the New Yorker, but no representatives have given me the time or the ear to share with them my concerns. And it's unfortunate because you take what I said before about for years, members of the left have been saying that the FBI was targeting vulnerable Muslim Americans. And I think too many people on the conservative side just said, no, that's not happening. I said, well, they can take the W on this one. You have some actual agreement here. We might not agree on the motivations behind why it's happening, but we can certainly agree on that it is. But unfortunately, I think there's too much tribalism